did. Very close to my heart. It's something I work a lot on and love playing with all those great musicians. So they'll be back at the end of the show. Other things I do is I'm also a composer. So I wanted to include something of mine, which is this next piece for solo vibraphone called Slow Fragment Vibraphone. It's part of a series of pieces that kind of exist as one large composition that can then be scaled back into small Justin wrote us a piece, and we're going to play it for the first time right now. Justin is a great friend of ours, a great player, and a great composer. He's in the Dagomba ensemble. He was the one that was beautifully singing on that second piece we did, Nantoo Nimidi. And you'll get to see him actually do some of the traditional Ghanaian dancing at the end. So this is his piece for Crusty. Tuned to a certain pitch. So I don't remember where he was, but somewhere he had heard three as a beautiful pitch range, which are the first three notes that I'll play. And the entire piece is just based on those three notes, reconfigured in as many ways as possible, different kinds of harmony embedded in me. It was written for my percussion teacher at Hart, and I'm the second person behind him to have performed it. And actually, I will be going back to Hart for the first time since my undergrad in early October, because unfortunately, about a year ago, David passed away. So we're doing a really beautiful 3-concert memorial weekend. And my teacher Ben will be playing this piece, and I'll be playing actually a different part of this piece. So this is the first time I've played it since his passing. So it's a very special performance that I wanted to bring here. So thanks. Additionally, we have Katie Eikam, who also played Justin's piece with me, playing support lunga. Kevin Moran and myself are playing lead lunga patterns, so kind of leading the talking ensemble. And then our gungong player, or our other basement player, is called Castorina. So thanks again to them for coming and playing this. Thanks to all of you for being here. I'm sure we have some time for questions at the end. So we'll play that.
frequencies that it's right, it sounds like the noise is coming from inside your ear? Or is that just fun vibraphone stuff?
It's a little of both. It worked a lot better than I expected in this hall, so that's not necessarily the intention of the piece, but it is something like I'm aware of with the piece. And like I said, it's from like a larger piece, and it kind of gets involved in that a little bit more. But yeah, it's really about like the difference between the consonances, the dissonances, and kind of playing with that idea, which naturally leads to that kind of beating effect within your ear. And there are certain, within this piece, there are different instrumentations. So the longest one is like 70 minutes. It's like a full-length evening piece. And that one's for glockenspiel. So the Glock and the vibraphone work really well for that. There's another one for marimba that doesn't work as well. And there's another one for cello that doesn't have that effect at all. But I'm glad it came out with the vibraphone because it's nice that it highlights that characteristic of this instrument.
Thank you.
And good question.
There's a question down there.
Yeah.
Hi. So after you tapped on that one, because you did the piece with that, after you like tapped it, did it make a difference in the sound, whether you went up or like to the side, you know what I'm talking about?
Which piece? Sorry.
Yeah, the one on
This one for the vibraphone?
Yeah.
Possibly. I think I know what you're talking about. Let me see. So, do you mean like tapping like here?
So I mean like whether you any of the, I don't know what they're called, like the things that you tap.
The bars?
Yeah,
These?
the bars. Whether you tapped it and like went up sort of.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Or like to the
Yeah,
side.
I got you.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, so, yeah, the bars. Essentially, it can. So, the vibraphone, the biggest difference between this instrument and that instrument is this one's metal and that one is wood. That's the most obvious difference. The other difference is this can sustain and has a pedal that can help it do so, whereas marimba can't. So, with marimba, I can hit that note, and that's it. With vibraphone, I can do all kinds of things. So I can hit it and have that same effect. I can hold down the pedal and get it to ring out. I can do things in between, like after pedaling, where I can do like and pedal right after, so they ring right into each other. I can dampen one with my other hand, that kind of thing. But really, a lot of it is essentially showmanship or performative actions. So, like with marimba, I can't, as I said, do anything to sustain this, but I can try and give a physical gesture that will give it more of an appearance of sustain, right? So I can do this and slowly lift, which is what I was doing with the vibraphone. Doesn't actually do much, especially with vibraphone that has a pedal, except to just show different phrasings and different ways of listening to it. And essentially the science of it with marimba, or with this gesture in general, is if you were to like measure using a microphone, if this versus like this sustains longer, it doesn't necessarily. But as kind of a human phenomenon, if I do like this in human psychology, it usually gives you more of an appearance of sustain. And it looks a little more natural and nice. So, kind of a long form answer. Cool. Yeah.
I noticed like during your exotic you said you're using kind of like a curved kind of drumstick.
Yeah.
I kind of want to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Let me grab that drum. So basically with these drums, it's kind of simple physics, right? Like this drum is facing flat, so I have a normal stick, right? But since I'm not striking this drum in this way, I'm striking it while it's hanging on me like this. It just makes sense to have the stick curved so that the round part can hit. I don't know like the full process of it, but essentially you tie a piece of string when you're making the stick so that it pulls down and kind of naturally ends up bending this way.
I also noticed
Oh yeah. So that's more of like a closed note. That's more on the bass drums, the gungongs. So basically with gungong, they have two different types of sounds, and they're easily called K and key. So you can have an open sound, which is K, and key. It's a little less formal with the talking drum or the lunga. It's more so just like keeping the beat. And sometimes there are some actual closed notes, but for the most part when I was doing it, it's just like a little extra insurance to make sure everything goes well. So with that music, a lot of what's happening is the lead lunga is kind of talking or saying praises to certain people or to certain things. Like one of the styles we can do is Woma, and Woma means dance. So if someone's dancing really well, or if Justin was doing great, which he was, then one of us will start to go. So there's like a whole system of like ideas and cues and language that goes along with this. And sometimes when you say certain parts of language, it elicits a response so that the bass drum gungong players will also play some kind of language response. So just to make sure those go a little more smoothly, what I usually tend to do is I'll do this so we know where we are. Or sometimes if I'm giving a cue, I'll end the cue going like that, just so they know, hey, I did this, in case they were like listening to each other or something else. That kind of thing. Yeah, and then next one.
Okay, these are two questions.
Yeah, no worries.
So when you were doing for Crusty, okay, I couldn't help it. So were you doing one style of tempo, so you were doing your tempo, and then she was doing your accent tempo? So you're playing your beat, or was she playing an offbeat? Because to me it sounded like one person was on tempo, and the other person was like, all right, let me play around with this real quick, and let me just do this accent. So when you played yours, she was like off just by a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And Justin can probably speak wherever you went. He's here. Yeah. He can speak more to it since it's his piece. But essentially, the idea is we kind of have this ABA form. And there's like a set pulse that we're following, but then we have exactly what you said, these kind of accented patterns that come out. Almost like solo sections. So essentially the form of it is like, we kind of establish where the beat is, then I start to go off of it, then I come back, then Katie starts to go off of it, then she comes back, then I go back off of it again, and then we come together. But yeah, it's totally this idea of like, this is always the same, but then there's certain accents that come out that kind of shift that. Yeah, good observation. And then
Wait, and then my other one was, couldn't help there was strings, and you guys kept doing the chicken wing thing. Is that to tighten the bass of the drum to make it sound louder or like?
Yeah, exactly. Well, not volume, but actual pitch. So here I can untie this drum. You essentially have 3 different pitches, and they're different between drums. So the pitch relation from drum to drum doesn't necessarily matter. It's just that you have a low sound, a medium sound, and a high sound, and those should always be consistent. So like for example, on this drum, I can do low, medium, and then high. So if I like to play the high sound on a different drum, it's not necessarily going to be this pitch. But when I play this drum, I should always try and make my high pitch that pitch. I should always be able to come back to that. And so essentially, you have this completely loose, right? Like that. And what we're doing with the chicken wing thing is we have a couple strings here that we're pulling forward, and then as the natural form of that motion, also pulling in your arm slightly. And that allows you to squeeze the drum to tighten the actual head. And tightening the head will raise the pitch. So it works just like these drums, where you have these tension rods, and you're just tuning them up. And the more you're tuning them, the more it's pressing down on the head and tightening the surface level, and thus making it higher. So we're kind of just doing that in real time. So, like, again. So that's just, this motion is allowing me to change the pitch, which is where the language comes in. So, those are how you can do different phrases and different, like, embellishment and that kind of thing. Cool. So there's a question around here.
Yeah. The stuff that you guys did as a group, was that like mostly improv, or was that like all rehearsed and like choreographed, everything?
Can you repeat the question? We can't hear it back here.
Yeah, sorry. It was with the large group Dagomba stuff. If it's mostly improvised or if we coordinated. And the answer is a little bit of both. So traditionally, the way it works is if you have a dancer, you're singing these praise names, and the dancer might come over and say, I want to play this rhythm. And then everyone pretty much knows that rhythm, and we'll just start playing it, and the dancer will start dancing. Next dancer will come up, same thing, right? So everyone kind of has these rhythms within their repertoire. How you work your way through the rhythms is much more improvised. So when one of us is like leading the group, I know like a certain, essentially like jazz, I know a certain vocabulary that will function correctly and will work, and I'm like playing through that in different ways. Since we didn't have dancers the whole time, I prearranged the order of the rhythms we would do. So essentially, if this were like actually in Ghana and we were doing it fully traditionally, someone would just be like calling stuff out or asking to dance to something, and we would play it. But the actual material within the rhythms is kind of just like a set basic idea for each person, and then improvising around. So, yeah, cool.
Is there any like written notation for the Dagomba music? Or is it all just passed down?
It's traditionally all passed down. And this is also like the Dagbanis keep their history through this drum. So I tried to stick to it as closely as possible while still maintaining kind of more of like the programmatic idea of this full concert. But their rhythms praise certain chiefs. So there are like 4 main chiefs, Rihanna, that we did today. We didn't necessarily do them in order, but traditionally you would go in the entirety of the order as much as you know. And that's kind of like, you know, it's not about how cool you are and like how fast you can play. For them it's more about like how much history you know, how much can you tell me about our culture and like the entire lineage of whoever Stanley you're playing with. So that's all taught orally and orally. So it's really just when someone's young, you just hand them a luna and they start to follow along. And then eventually they might learn a little bit more material. That being said, when I was learning this drumming at Cal Arts with Andrew Gruschow, he has a system he uses. It doesn't really notate the rhythmic value, but it can show like how the pitch is bent. So it's not really like fully functional, like I can show it to you, and it won't necessarily mean anything.